Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Our next presenters at the Oil and Gas Conference are CEO Chris Romer and Chief Operating Officer Will Foyles with Project Canary. They are a provider of continuous, rugged, simple, and affordable environmental monitoring systems for methane, working on ozone. So please listen in on this presentation. It's going to be great.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dan. And it's a pleasure to present today to the Oil and Gas Conference. My name is Chris Romer. I'm co-founder and CEO of Project Canary. We're pleased to present today. I have with me my COO, Will Foyles. Thank you, Will, for joining us. It's interesting times, not just from the pandemic, but long before the pandemic. What was facing the industry was whether or not its social license to operate could pivot to the times that we're currently facing. We're pleased to present today, and hopefully we can give you a flavor as why we believe that environmental transparency on data is actually required to help the social license of the industry move forward. Who are we? We're basically Project Canary and now IES together. What do? We manage 24/7 environmental data for upstream, midstream, and utility partners. Why do we do that? Because it really matters in this environment to have a real clear understanding of environmental quality, data, and ultimately 2020 is the year that the E in ESG is going to go data-driven. And I understand fully that many of you out there in the capital markets, as well as the upstream and midstream and utility partners, have always viewed environmental data as being something to manage in fear. What I hope to convince you today is the most important thing for you to be thinking about is how you're going to get a strong ESG rating so that we can help the entire industry be helpful in its social license to operate. You know, sometimes I kid that I am the last Democrat for fracking. I have that bumper sticker, and when I go to Democratic gatherings, people are not very friendly. So this issue is now an existential risk to everybody who watches this. We have to be transparent about our carbon footprint, and we have to solve the problem. So that's my intro. Now you know a little bit more about me. This is my 7th career. I actually have done this long before. So starting, who are we? First and foremost, we are a B Corp. What does a B Corp mean? It means that we can do well by doing good. Why does that matter? Because ultimately the brand of your product, the ability for us to sell the transition of the oil and gas community in a low carbon environment matters. And to be honest, it's not just right now a demand problem, we have a brand problem. In places like California and New York, they're already writing us off, and that's not right nor fair. So what do? We provide ESG data with IoT devices as well as TrustWell certification. Why do we do it? Because we intend to be the trusted data provider so that the E in ESG reports can be effective for markets, consumers, and regulators. Again, this is the 2nd B Corp that I've built. The first B Corp that I built is known as Guild Education. It's now valued at over $1 billion. A little bit of an update, because exciting news in our world. We just did a merger with Independent Energy Standards and some exciting work that they've been doing for 4 years on responsibly sourced gas. So just to be clear, our new corporate company name is International Environmental Standards, which is also a B Corp. We'll be DBA in the energy space using Project Canary for the time being. Why does it matter that we have experience in the B Corp space? So just like Patagonia, just like Ben & Jerry's, just like for those of us in Colorado, New Belgium beer, millennials and people of that era are starting to ask, is capitalism good for my future? What we need to prove is capitalism absolutely is the only way to allocate capital and resources, but we fundamentally have been dishonest about not bringing the social cost of carbon into the equation, and to be an independent, trusted source is super important on that. What are we doing in the merger? We're combining continuous monitoring air emission data with TrustWell certification so that when we put gas into a pipeline, the buying utility or the buying customer knows that that's a high quality gas that does not leak methane into the environment and damage the environment in a way that's no longer acceptable. On the track record of what we at Project Canary did, combined with our friends from IES, we've now done 85% of the responsibly sourced gas deals that have been placed to date with utilities like Virginia Gas and New Jersey Resources. We are also becoming very quickly the ESG platform that European Canadian banks are using to start thinking through how and in what format to lend both debt and equity to these important companies. What we validate is the carbon impact of the entire supply stream. So think of us as being able to do tip-to-tip ability to provide carbon and methane intensity all the way from the tip of the drill bit all the way to the tip of the furnace or that gas peak or potentially in California. Super important because this weekend, California had blackouts, and they've had that because they've been pitching energy as an ideology with 100% electrification. We need to go back to having a conversation about energy systems, not ideologies. If you want to learn more about that, go look at my LinkedIn. There's a very robust conversation about that going on even today as we speak. Lastly, we provide validation and performance with real-time monitoring that gives both our partners as well as buyers trusted data on the methane and intensity. In addition of the 13 major partners, which go all the way up to the international OGCI members, some of them are having ozone problems in certain basins, whether it's Uinta, Pinedale, Eagleford, and in cases in Lee and Eddy County in New Mexico. Many of these companies not only have a methane emissions issue to deal with, many of them also have an ozone problem that they're trying to manage under the Clean Air Act. Quick summary of our team, and I'm just going to pause for a second and let my COO, Will Foyles, introduce himself. Will?
Thanks, Chris. This is Will Foyles here, COO of Project Canary. And I came to Project Canary with a strong track record of data and financial markets, especially related to energy. Prior to this, I was actually a graduate student at Stanford University, where I was working on 2 graduate degrees, one an MBA at the Graduate School of Business, and another, an environmental resources degree at the Stanford Earth School. And prior to that, I was at Bloomberg. I was helping to develop new data acquisition techniques and technologies. Basically, the short of it was a lot of investors were seeing that their models were breaking down. Why? Because they didn't have accurate and trusted data. We saw this in the unconventional space. We saw this with economic data abroad. And the moral of the story is I was led to believe that without accurate and trusted data, financial markets really are in disarray.
Great. And Jory, our new partner, who's executive chairman, comes from Morgan Stanley, Bain Capital, also went to Stanford Business School. He spent the last 5 years developing the TrustWell certificate. A little bit more of information about TrustWell. TrustWell is an enormously rigorous certificate that has a bronze, silver, gold, and platinum rating for how well did a pad get drilled. Think about it like the Carfax of the oil and gas industry. 85% of the RSG gas deals in the country have now been certified with TrustWell. They've been providing certificates for the last 4 years, and they've developed the market standard of that product. The TrustWell rating process is enormously vigorous. So people like Jonah Energy up in Wyoming are using it to help make sure that their stakeholders understand that they've done the categories of water, air, land, and community to the best of their ability. It was basically a precursor to the kind of more intensive ESG work that we're now doing when we combine continuous monitoring. In terms of growth and momentum, as we said, 6 of the 7 transactions that have been done by our team. We also are quickly opening up regulatory pathways, both in California and in New York, where, as an example, the Marcellus natural gas companies have had stranded gas they cannot convince other buyers in the East Coast to buy. The work that we're doing is now providing real social license, so both the pipeline companies and that clean carbon pulling out of the Marcellus can have a chance to go to New York City. And I've been out fairly clearly calling out, honestly, mostly Democratic governors, why are they burning double dirty Russian gas when they should be burning RSG certified gas out of the Marcellus? Just a quick summary of our company. We have master service agreements with over 13 major players in the upstream, midstream, and utility space. They're kind of the brand names you'd expect to be early adopters of this technology. We are also very quietly participating in numerous studies with state regulators across multiple basins and all 5 basins, as well as very well-known brand name environmental people who are trying to figure this out. So before I go into that, I see, Dan, you're raising your hand to ask a few questions. And so I thought maybe we should just take a few questions from the audience at this point.
Yeah, I think, Chris, great to see you today, and thank you for participating in the Oil and Gas Conference. The first question I have, and I think several of our viewers have popping up online, is can you tell us a little bit more about Project Canary and why it matters that you're a B Corp? What does it mean and why does it matter?
So a B Corp it's an actual certification under federal tax law. We're still for profit, but it means that we can have an overt double bottom line. And when you think of an industry that's really struggling with its social license to operate, having entrusted independent ledger quality data to help the industry sort out how to stop these important leaks, it really matters that we are not simply another oilfield services company and that we truly have a double bottom line. I just built one of the 4 B Corps worth $1 billion named Guild Education. It was enormously effective in that space. It will be enormously effective as we try to restore the industry's social license to operate, that we are overtly someone who's doing well by doing good.
Yeah, on your LinkedIn post and website, you talk a lot about the industry's social license to operate, which you just mentioned. What does it mean and why does it matter for the oil and gas industry?
Well, I think it's tragic today that right now there's a 105-degree temperature somewhere in Los Angeles, and there are vulnerable Californians who do not have air conditioning or even the ability to turn on a fan because they have blackouts. And you know why they have blackouts? Because we, in both sides, in both buckets, both on the left and the right, we're basically fighting energy ideologies, not energy systems. What I have done in my state Senate career and elsewhere is, even though I'm a Democrat for fracking, I'm very tough on the industry. The industry absolutely has to clean up these leaks, and the industry has to go back out to California and say, the silliness of which you tried to do 100% electrification with renewables has left those poor, low-income people in Los Angeles without power this weekend. And that sucks. And so what makes me angry is the industry who denies that these methane leaks are a problem, as well as the environmentalists who are arguing that you can do 100% renewable today, neither of which is true. So the social license to operate is the party that sits in the middle. This is the kind of solutions I've been doing my entire life. And I need the industry to hear me loud and clear. You have a brand problem. We have a brand problem. We need to go back into California and explain we're going to be burning carbon for many decades to come. We just need to burn clean carbon. That's why social license to operate matters. I'm sorry if I get a little agitated about this, but it really makes me sad that there are 2 billion people in energy poverty on the planet, and we in Colorado have the cleanest carbon on the planet. We need to help get some of that clean Colorado carbon to burn for the 2 billion people who are in energy poverty. So I'll step off my soapbox for a minute. Don't get me going, Dan.
Hey, Chris, it's great to, I love people with passion. So tell me a little bit more about the merger with the Independent Energy Standards. Tell me a little bit more about it, explain why, and kind of that background there.
Sure. Well, the market needed some kind of quality data to really execute for regulators, for capital markets, as well as ultimately for buyers, utilities, and customers. There was just no transparency in that. And Jory and his team at IES had set up a really positive certification for Trustwell that was getting a lot of traction. What they kept hearing is that they wanted continuous monitoring added on top of that certificate. So it was just an easy way for the two of us to get together. And it's kind of like a 2 + 2 = 6 in this world. And I think very quickly you'll see our certification become the standard in the industry.
Next question I see coming across is, who do you see using the CSG data from this new platform?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one, Dan. I really envision the entire supply chain using this data, from upstream producers, midstream pipeline companies, downstream, even utilities to monitor their assets. So one thing that really turned me on to this was during my graduate studies at Stanford, I really started to notice the differential between the top-down numbers and the bottom-up numbers. What do I mean by that? Well, we see atmospheric levels of methane soaring, yet the bottom-up numbers aggregated coming from the companies don't match up. And so in a world where there's a lot of uncertainty around things are coming from, and as Chris highlighted, this is very important. If you have a branding problem, you're going to get labeled as the problem. So I encourage the industry to come out, if you are a clean operator, and show with transparent and trusted data that your assets are not part of the problem. We've seen this before with fracking fluids, with Frac Focus. The industry was facing a lot of pressure. Everyone remembers the movie that came out. And yet when they leaned in and provided that transparency, suddenly you never hear anything else about fracking fluids anymore. This is what I encourage the industry to do with emissions, especially greenhouse gases.
Yeah, I know that here at Entercom, we do a lot of consulting on the ESG side for E&Ps, and kind of collecting data and finding sources of accurate data is very important and sometimes hard to find. For you guys, what does data-driven ESG ratings mean for the E&P, the capital markets, and regulators?
Yeah, I'll take this one again. I mean, capital markets are increasingly going to require trusted ESG data, not glossy sustainability reports with unaudited claims. They're especially going to be looking at the E part of that ESG and want data. Why? It's science driven. And that's something that I think our team really understands here is the capital markets will require this. Chris Romer, our CEO, 20 plus years on Wall Street doing public financing. Our executive chairman, Jory Calkins, has M&A experience at Morgan Stanley and private equity experience at Bain Capital. And I myself have experience at Bloomberg helping to develop trusted data. And I think this is so important because if you are a leading operator and you want access to either credit or equity, you're increasingly going to have to provide that. And I'll give you an anecdote story to help flush this out. We were down in Houston and we were at a meeting with a potential client. Good meeting, went well, come outside the meeting, hey, get pulled aside by someone at the meeting. And they said, hey, I really wish I would have had this at my last firm. It was a major independent. We said, why, what happened? He said, we went out and bought a bunch of these assets on PDP value, right? So they weren't planning on investing any more incremental CapEx or very little. Not long after that purchase, the state regulator came out and did their own audit after complaints from the local residents. And oops, turns out there was a lot of emissions coming off of these sites. They were fined and required to retrofit those sites. Well, they bought them on PDP value. It really didn't add up. So it ended up shutting in a lot of the wells and writing off those assets. And he said, knowing that this data exists now, I would have never bought those assets without an environmental audit. And we see this all the time. If you purchase a company, if you're in the private equity space or anywhere else, you require a financial audit to understand that, hey, this company is what they say they are. You are increasingly going to see an environmental audit as well. It just makes sense. It's a huge liability that's lurking out there. And I think the financial markets are going to require it going forward. As it relates to regulators, you're seeing this grow as well. We see this here in Colorado. The regulators want to know that a certain site is not going to harm residents. And they're starting to require continuous monitoring here in Colorado. And I think you're going to see this across the space. So there's going to be a huge reward to those operators that get out in front of this, monitor their wells, and be pretty transparent about it.
Yep, thanks, Will. And that, by the way, that's why Bayswater is monitoring 99% of its production, Crestone Peak 80% of their production, and we're already seeing benefits of that. I can't disclose who it is, but one of our partners who's doing continuous monitoring just got a major Ivy League quality university to invest in March of this year in their E&P. And that's at the same time the students are asking them to divest fossil fuels. So this ball game is moving. The tectonic plates are shifting on the capital markets. And so I would encourage the banks and the equity people listening to this to reach out to us because we have a playbook that's very quickly going to be the definitive playbook. So what I'd like to do is just go a little bit more into the technology and how it works. So I'll try to do this quickly. It's super important to remember that it's continuous data, it's actionable data, and most importantly, it's trusted data. So many of our E&Ps are struggling with why do you run a SaaS model? Why do you run a lease model? And the answer is if you XYZ E&P own those canaries, the public and the NGOs are not going to believe that data. And that's really harsh. But our model is this, it's 100% the E&P's data, but it's encrypted and there's no way the E&P can change the data on the pad. That's super important going forward. One of the things most people miss on this, and I'm just going to be quick about this, but this has been the standard right here with infrared cameras. And honestly, most LDAR programs have been basically like running a fire department without smoke detectors. They literally drive the fire truck up, knock on the pad and say, hey, is there something leaking? Is there a fire here today? And that's basically the standard of the industry. What you really need is actual data. And by the way, drones and satellites are going to get better and better, but they're not yet continuous. Where you want to be is continuous and actionable. There's so many E&Ps who did other technologies, and they said, Chris, we never learned anything that changed our behaviors. We've radically changed that. We're working with 13 of the biggest people in this industry in different parts and different basins, and have learned a ton in doing this. In quick summary, we have over 7,000 sites already under contract and are excited about using those to build a real business and to build this practice. So summary is, over the last 30 days, we have over 40 million data points from 200 Canaries that had 200 different emission events that we know happened on those pads. Half of those events we could have probably caught with SCADA data. So one of the things we're helping a lot of our operators to do is to look at their SCADA data compared to this new blockchain quality, ledger quality environmental data. So we're finding things in literally hours and minutes that most E&Ps didn't find for up to a month. And one of the challenges is, in a lot of jurisdictions now, when they come up and find a leak and nobody's been on that site for 90 days, they start to calculate that fine as if that valve or that thief hatch or that situation on that combustor has been happening for 90 days. With our Canaries, we can provide E&Ps an affirmative defense that that was an intermittent leak. Our technology is quickly moving forward with a patented process. We're the only people in the country that have a patent ability to pull a SUMA canister based on a VOC plume. So that's a really important technology in Colorado because of the need to be able to speciate off of a given plume. If you think through what people really want on drilling and flowback, is they truly want to know what's in that plume, and you want to have a super affordable way to do that. The only comparable technology that gets you the same speciated answer is $500,000, which is basically, we're about 1% of that number. So we're pretty proud of the way in which the IoT devices combined with our own innovative patents are starting to revolutionize the business. Just for clarity, we can put an awful lot of different sensors into our box with our partners from Lunar Outpost. And in many cases where we're facing ozone issues, it's an entirely different program. This is an example of a leak that happened one morning with an operator up in Wyoming. And we started seeing something that obviously went off in our algorithm that said something was happening on the site. We notified them by about 10 o'clock. Sure enough, they got somebody out on the site at 1 o'clock, and a field hand had just left the cap off a tank. And so as the VP for EH&S said, this is so revolutionary for them literally to, within 7 hours, see a leak, find a cap, and solve a problem. This is another very common problem where, in essence, there were subcontractors doing water hauling who just weren't using their vapor lines. And one of our partners who does a lot of continuous monitoring began to see this pattern that whenever they were on site, they were having leaks. And interestingly enough, this isn't even a defined leak for somebody like CDPHE at the Colorado Health Department. This is just sloppy behavior. And one of the things that this kind of data provides is a positive feedback loop between your ops team as well as your EHS team. And sure enough, they went out, put up signs and said, hey, from now on, all you water haulers, you better use your vapor lines or else we're gonna catch you. They caught them a second time and they fired them. So here's a way in which we're cleaning up the industry because we have actionable data based upon what isn't really even defined as a leak. It was literally just sloppy behavior. So that's just a quick summary of how it works. As we start to go forward, one of the things we realized, as Will said, is what this industry needs right now is effectively a frac focus for emission technology. So all these companies need to have a safe place to put their data under a highly confidential agreement where they can learn best practices, whether it's firing their subcontractor water haulings or adjusting their combustors. They need a safe place to share their data. And we're very pleased that working with the Payne Institute at the School of Mines, we've effectively created the first frac focus style collaboration process where people can sort of open source their problem and learn how best to solve it. This is exactly what Payne Institute did with the flaring data that it just released 2 weeks ago with OGCI. This is going to be the game-changing process under which the industry is going to learn to extend its social license to operate. It's going to provide the ability and the safe place to get radically transparent with their data. You know, it's no secret, as I was in Houston in January and gave a speech to everybody from Aramco to the OGCI to every major in the room. And I told them 2020 was the year the E in ESG was going to go data driven. Half the people threw me dagger eyes. The other half handed me their business cards. And sure enough, Larry Fink, State Street, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, they've all started to say, you know what? We have to look at the way we're lending to the fracking industry. We can no longer tolerate not having ESG ratings for this activity. So it matters what your E&P ESG rating is. It's also going to matter to your bank. And your bank is also going to want to know whether that site is leaking or not, or they may not give you a new renewal on your RBL. And they're certainly not going to give you one of our new programs that reduces the interest rate on an RBL based on continuous monitoring. Finally, it's really important to understand that it is not true that every molecule of oil or gas in a pipeline has the same carbon footprint. And so what you're going to see is the ability to start differentiating literally by basin and by company what is the carbon footprint. And the reason this matters is for us to extend our social license to operate, we need to be very clear we're going to stop the methane leaks. And that's just the bottom line. So with that, Dan, that's our presentation today. I hope we've stimulated, as I often do with my LinkedIn posts. Please go see my LinkedIn post, Chris Romer at LinkedIn. You will see a very rigorous debate going on about this. I know I'm making some people uncomfortable, but sometimes you need to hear what you're going to do. And I'm telling you, this is not just about capital markets. This industry needs to think about how it's going to hire the talent to get millennials to solve this problem. And the only way to do that is to be radically transparent with trusted, affordable data and to change the way we think and extend our social license to operate. Thanks for your time today.
You bet, Chris, and we'll follow up with just a few more questions. We got just a couple minutes still left for this time together. You mentioned the Payne Institute at Colorado School of Mines. Love the School of Mines. I have a graduate from this May that's now in the U.S. Navy. Love Colorado School of Mines. You shared about the partnership with Payne Institute. Tell me a little bit more about that and what it means for your company.
Sure. The Payne Institute is a very important partner for us. Most people don't know this, but they are now collecting all of the flaring data from all over the world. So even a sovereign like Qatar or Nigeria is having their flaring data. It's not going to work for us to clean up our carbon in the United States and put it into an LNG tanker and send it to China if somebody else from Qatar can cheat. So what we're setting up is a transparent process where everybody who's burning carbon anywhere to feed the 2 billion people living in energy poverty that are burning wood and burning dung, they need to burn clean Colorado oil or natural gas. And we need an honest broker in that relationship. I could not think of a more honest broker than the Colorado School of Mines because the industry trusts them. And Morgan Brazilian there came from the World Bank specifically to provide this transparency. We're very pleased to do an open source partnership with anybody who wants to participate because our goal, just as our mission as a B Corp, our job is to help sustain the social license to operate and preserve these amazing jobs.
Yeah, then I'll follow up with that. You know, you say you're a Democrat for fracking, which I applaud. We see a big push from the party, whether it be in California, all across the country, to speed up an energy transition or really to kind of eliminate, oil and gas to some extent without really discussing and realizing that natural gas is a fantastic low carbon solution for the world. You mentioned, supplying it to so much of the world that's in energy poverty. Tell me how you what's the response to being a Democrat with fracking, and why has this motivated you to kind of get involved and kind of take up the mantle of where you're at now with Project Canary?
Sure. Well, this started way back when I was in the state Senate in 2010, when we did with Josh Penry, the first ever Clean Air, Clean Jobs, where we closed a coal plant and gave Anadarko a very nice contract to burn natural gas. So this is not something I came to in 2020. It's something I've lived for a decade. I have openly opposed my friend Jared Polis on some of the fracking bans that have been proposed, because I think it's bad for Colorado. It's bad, and it's bad for those great jobs up in the DJ. That said, I am not for this industry if it doesn't stop the leaks. I will oppose this industry if it keeps its head in the sand and continues to leak methane, but it doesn't need to. We know already that our IoT devices can close in minutes thief hatches that were left open for months. We know that we can stop the combustors in the Permian from not firing, just venting instead of burning that. So I have a high bar here, and I'm more than willing to take the knives in the back that I take for being a Democrat for fracking. I'm telling you, the clean carbon from the United States has to be certified as clean carbon. And then once we do that, we can export it to the rest of the world. At the same time, we're gonna set up a system of checking to stop the leaks out of the double dirty Russian gas. My goal in life is to support US clean fracking as well. And we need to change the term fracking to just be high-tech extraction, because it's become a bad brand in and of itself. But at the same time, we need to go to Europe and ask them to stop buying double dirty Russian gas. If you give me a chance, and by the way, I think candidate Biden is on this same game plan. Be very aware of what was not in his energy plan, which was a ban on fracking. Fracking is not a bad thing in and of itself. Fracking and leaking methane is destroying the social license to operate, and we need a generation of CEOs to stop it, and they know exactly who they are.
Sure. Well, listen, it sounds like a great plan, and it certainly sounds like what you're saying. And don't let me put words in your mouth. Will, you can join in and let me know if I'm off base. But it sounds like you're for the low carbon solution, the lower carbon solution that natural gas provides, being a clean fuel, provided that we can eliminate the methane leak that is, you know, more damaging to the atmosphere. Is that correct?
As long as we stop the leaks, the math
Yeah.
is very simple. And so the math is that methane is 80 times worse than carbon. If you stop the methane leaks in the oil and gas industry, it will buy us time to a lower carbon transition. My prediction is we're going to end up in a method of a lot of renewables combined with burning carbon and sequestering carbon. And we look forward to also monitoring those sequestered wells in the Permian. But trust me, we are not going to have enough solar and wind power. Because let me give you one more fact why I'm a Democrat for fracking. If the North Koreans or the Iranians ever take down our natural electrical grid, we're going to thank our stars that we have that dense energy in those pipelines. And I know a bunch of people believe it, but it's almost a travesty when you look at why did Dominion sell all of its gas assets to Berkshire Hathaway? It's because the social license to operate in democratic states has been lost by an industry that lost its way. My goal is to stand at the public square as a B Corp and lead them out of the wilderness.
Couple more questions real quick. And I want to touch on the work you're doing with ozone is one question. And then how do you differentiate from other environmental services? Those are the two questions. Only have a couple minutes to get those in.
Sure, ozone's simple. It's a hard cap. You know, if you're in a non-attainment zone and you enter the DJ, they're going to tell you to lay down your rigs if you don't stop the leaks. And you can't stop the leaks without running a fire department without smoke detectors. We're going to not only provide that solution, we're going to teach the DJ how to stop the leaks. That said, the biggest problem in the DJ is I-25, not the oil and gas industry. And we're going to have to solve that together. But we need to effectively have continuous monitoring to stop the leaks. There are 6 or 7 basins that are very near hard caps on ozone. We're working with some of the smartest companies in each of those basins to stop the leaks.
And last thing, how do you differentiate from other environmental companies with respect to this air monitoring?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. We're a B Corp. I do not think that if you're basically a traditional oilfield services company, that you're effectively going to be able to run the rig and basically monitor yourself. I mean, there's just a process of auditing. I mean, we saw this in Enron where Arthur Andersen was doing both consulting and auditing. Sooner or later, the conflict of interest between that becomes a problem. So because the social license to operate is so critical, the first job is I have to convince the industry, including some members of OGCI, they're actually not going to be able to monitor themselves. They actually are going to need a third-party monitor. And I'm happy to explain why this is going to be so critical to their social license to operate. I know it's enormously uncomfortable, but you can have a model where a third party provides actionable, confidential data for them to stop the leaks. And once we stop the leaks, then we'll publish that data.
Well, Will and Chris, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you for supporting the Oil and Gas Conference. Certainly want to encourage people to set up one-on-one meetings with you. And I know that you're one of the last presenters here in the conference. So reach out to Chris, reach out to Will, find them on the internet and set up some meetings with them to learn more about Project Canary and how it can solve problems if you're an E&P or midstream and you're transporting the natural gas. Or if you're a capital markets player and you want to learn a little bit more about that accountability and the metrics around the ESG scoring. So thank you guys very much for your time. And we look forward to learning more about you over the years.
Yeah. So Dan, in closing, if you're a debt provider or you're an equity provider or a bank, your competitors are already talking to us. You should give us a call.
Awesome. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
On behalf of all of us here at Entercom, we would like to thank our sponsors, presenters, and attendees for their continued support of the Oil and Gas Conference, especially this year, our 25th anniversary and our first virtual conference. We couldn't do it without your support. Thank you and see you next year.